I've found over the years of now doing the towing like this that I am much more productive as an instructor. My students learn and fly twice as much in half the time with a third of the effort because they don't have to climb back up and down the hill, and they have more fun and they become better pilots, and that's what it's all about.
Scooter towing is the use of a motor scooter as a stationary winch to tow a hang glider or paraglider into the air. The rear wheel of the scooter is modified to become a drum that holds the tow line. The scooter is secured in place in an open field adjacent to the point from which the pilot will be launching. The tow line runs from the scooter to a turnaround pulley anchored to the ground some distance away, and then back to the glider. The key aspects of the Blue Sky scooter towing method that make it such a valuable training tool are the use of a low horsepower scooter to provide a gentle and precisely controllable tow tension, the use of special purpose-built large area lightweight training gliders that allow slow flight speeds in no or very light wind conditions, the combination of these two factors in an instructional technique that involves extended low-speed, low-altitude tows, providing the student with an ideal learning environment and experience.
You guys will be starting right next to me, just barely a wingspan away. The line, in a moment, I'll be pulling out to a point that's about 1,000 feet away from where we are now. That line will go out and run through this pulley. And the pulley is very simple, has a ball bearing in it, and we'll be attaching it with the carabiner to an anchor that's already preset in the ground. We'll run the line through that and back, and it'll come back to us. So there'll be a little over actually 2,000 feet of line out for what we're going to do today. The scooter itself doesn't even need tied down. All we need to do is chock the wheels and it stays put. It makes it very simple and easy to move if the wind changes. Generally, I block the rear of the scooter up just to give me a proper line angle out of the scooter. Once I have the tow line set up, I have a leader line that will place on the end of the tow line, and that's just for some easy changes for me. I can hook anything I want to the end of this tow line, but once it goes out and comes back, I'll just attach it with the carabiner. Got a little red flag / parachute to add a little drag and let me find the rope very easily, and just a small ring at the end for you to attach to. Once we have the line set up, we'll have your orange cone out there about 2/3 of the way to the pulley. Remember, that's the point at which we want to at least be off the rope or have landed before we get to that cone, so that we never have a chance of running out of rope, and we won't let that happen. That's a big safety issue, but I'll be a big factor on that, as well as teaching you how to do it properly. So I'm going to set the course up. You guys get ready to fly, and it looks like the wind conditions are good. Our goal today is to take off comfortably and aggressively, fly 5 feet off the ground, maybe 500 to 700 feet in length, and land safely, maybe some on your feet. If we do that, you've had a great first day. When we start out, we want the nose a little higher. That angle of attack right here to level ground is very comparable to a hill anyway. The attitude is lower here than here. The angle of attack needs to be high. My job on takeoff is to make it smooth and gradual. If they're not doing it right, I don't add enough power for them to get off the ground. We keep them low and slow. And that's the whole idea of keeping it safe. All right, once a student is in the air and flying along, even our total beginners don't even have to release the rope. It's just one less thing for them to deal with. We can fly the student along to the end of the course without running out of rope and without running out of landing area and float them to the ground. They're only just a few feet off the ground anyway. So as we get them to a desired position, if their wings are level, I will gently start reducing the power until the student lands. What we try to teach them to do is have their legs under them, walking in the air, so as their feet start gracefully touching the ground, they'll start supporting their own weight and gently pushing the bar out on the condor until it comes to a stop. So we always err on the side of conservatism. We want it to be soft, we want it to be slow. If a student's low and they're doing things wrong, we let them land, go back, talk about it, and we teach. That's our job. So we teach them and we try to do it properly. The harnesses are generally the same as I would use on the training hill, except for I do have to sew some tabs on here to pull. I like pulling from the hips with my system because we also pull from the glider up high. Much like you saw today on the flights that we were doing, we like to use a system very similar to the AeroTow system, and I've found from doing it myself and experimenting with the teaching that we have much better luck. Not to say that some schools can't have good luck just pulling from the body, but we've found that it just solidifies a lot of things that they're doing, and we're controlling the pitch attitude a little better by having this at the right point on the keel. Where that right point is takes some experimentation. If you have it too far forward on the keel, it does make the glider harder to launch. We found on gliders like the Falcon, just an inch in front of the hang point raises the thrust line enough to make it much more adaptable. And on a glider like the Condor, a few inches forward of that seems to be helpful. But with the tow lines, we use a standard weak link like we would for AeroTow. In this particular case, it's 130 green line, 130 pound test. We also use safety devices like the secondary barrel release that we'd see in aero towing. As a beginner, they don't need to use that, but as they get high enough where they could possibly overfly some things with some problems, we want a secondary release in the system, and we want to teach them good habits from the start with that system, so we'll use that. We always use steel carabiners and try to have the best quality equipment we can. As a primary release on the glider, as you saw again with the towing today, we use a standard Moyes-Bailey AeroTow release, the Spinnaker release, with the bicycle handle on the down tube right about where the normal hand placement would be of the student, so it's very easy to get at to activate. The rope that we use is 7/64 inch Spectron. It's a 1,200 pound test rope that's coated with Teflon. It's a very good rope. It's hollow braid so we can splice easily if we need it and fid the rope, and works very well. The student could actually hook straight into the tow line and not have a problem. I like to use what I just call a leader line. When I'm pulling beginners on a Condor and we're only pulling them 5 to 10 feet off the ground, I really don't need much of a drag device. A simple flag on the line so when I go out to retrieve the line, it's easy to find, is helpful. But again, when I'm pulling students, I'm pulling them so light wherever they land, the rope's going to be right there anyway. It's not like they're up high and dropping the rope. But a little device so that when the rope is released, that it creates a little drag on the line is helpful, but it's really not a big deal or a thing to be concerned about when you're doing the low-level trolling type towing like we do here in training. The pulley itself in the ground, I do make these. You can buy commercially rated pulleys. A couple things that we look for. Number one, we want something that can flex around and move. We want something that spins easily. It does not have to be large. About a 4-inch pulley, 3 to 4 inches is plenty large for what we're doing out here. This one I made with an idler pulley. One of the things you want to be concerned about is the bottom of the pulley, the inside. If the pulley has a groove that a rope could actually pull down into and tighten on, you'd want to avoid that kind of a pulley. This one is kind of brazed in between and has a smooth bottom, and the rope, when it's being pulled under tension, will not wedge in between the plates of metal. So it's more of a U, and that works very well. A lot of these pulleys come with just a brass bushing in them. We pop that bushing out and replace it with a high-speed roller bearing, which is inexpensive to find, and it rolls very well. This particular pulley has thousands and thousands of toes on it. We even had a day after a heavy rain where it was submerged during the entire lesson in 3 inches of water. That was 4 years ago, and I still haven't greased it or had to do any repairs to it, so it's sealed and does fine. The 2 plates are nothing but 1/8 inch aluminum. The shape, though not really significant, it does allow me to place the pulley the way I want. I've got 3 bolts around the pulley that act as guides so the rope can't come out of the pulley. It always stays on. I've never had a line pop off this pulley and wedge down in here. I keep the tolerances small. It's easy to do by shimming it properly with washers until you get just the right fit. There's no drag, nothing keeping it from working properly. I just use an old carabiner to hook this to the ground. It's just attached to a bolt at the back of the pulley, and then we'll have screw-in augers into the ground that we'll hook this to. But the pulleys are easy to make and can be constructed in very little time. A couple hours of metal work. If people aren't very adept at working with metal, it's easy to get a machine shop to do it, or I'd be glad to help guide people or make them for them. Very simple device. The anchors that we use, we'll use anywhere from 12 to 18 inch anchors in the soil that we have here. We have a clay type soil and they bite really well. You don't want to use the coiling type of dog anchors. They are not strong enough, but we'll use a big heavy steel auger that has a welded auger just at the bottom. And once you get those screwed in, we just leave them permanently on our site. Many people that would use an area that everything has to be taken up on, you'd screw the anchor in and unscrew it at the end of the day. Maybe use some kind of a pipe to use as a lever to turn it. And it's just a few minutes to put it in and a few minutes to pull it out. And we've never pulled an anchor out of the ground here at Blue Sky. I have been to places where the soil is very sandy and it slowly can work out. In that case, you'd probably want a longer anchor, maybe 18 or 24 inches, so it goes deeper into the soil and bites really well. Having it pull out of the soil is kind of like having a weak link break. Not a whole lot is going to happen there for the type of towing that I'm doing. Again, low level towing, but it's just a hassle you don't really want to have a problem with. The scooter that you see to my left here is a 50cc Yamaha. It's about 4.5 horsepower. And when I got it and rode it, I made sure that it'll do the job. I feel that a small scooter like this, which does a great job for teaching, if I can put my body on it and ride it at about 35 miles an hour, it's probably going to be enough to do the hang gliding training. You don't want to be fooled by 50cc moped type scooters that really aren't going to go fast enough to give you the line speed to pull. On my units, I've replaced the little batteries on the scooters with car batteries because throughout a day of towing, I might start the scooter 40 or 50 times. And you want to have some extra power there. You don't want to get out in the field and find out that the scooter won't start, although this one happens to have a kickstart, which does help us if the battery gets low. The rear wheel we replace with a flanged wheel that turns into a spool for our rope. The wheel size limits what kind of rope or what size or distance of rope that we can place on it. This particular wheel, the flange size, simply I make it as big as the swing arm on the scooter will allow me to make it without rubbing it. This particular one is holding about 2,500 feet of rope, which is plenty for running the rope out about 1,000 feet and then back to me through our pulley. Take notice I've removed the front wheel just to use the front forks as a guide for the rope coming out the front, going to the pulley. And when we tow, I simply ride the scooter just like you normally would. A throttle access, I've got a little bit of brake there when I need it, and it's just a very simple way to go. This particular scooter was built on its own little cart for driving around our flight park. The scooter here is a 125 Yamaha, so we'll have a little more power, a little more line speed, and a little more line to lay out. With this scooter, pulling people to a couple hundred feet in training is no problem as they advance. The little scooter is mainly for flights of under 100 feet, which obviously is plenty to work people towards their hang ones and beyond. Something visible for the students to use out in front is a marker. We use the cone for three purposes: a mild target out front to look through, but primarily as a cushion. We place this roughly 2/3 of the way between where we're towing from and where the end of the line will go around the pulley, because we never want the students to get the rope that short. So it's just a device we use for safety. If somebody couldn't release here at the altitudes I'm pulling them, as long as I'm not making the rope shorter, they could fly this far past the pulley and still be safe. But generally, I'm not pulling anybody high unless they've already proven to me that they can release every time. And again, this is something that just can't work some of the time. It's got to work all the time. And so far for us, in about 17,000 tows, it has. When we start pulling the rope back from a stop position, we got to make sure when we start to pull the rope that we don't accelerate too fast. That can get the spool spinning too fast, and you can easily get a backlash, which nobody's on tow, so it's not a problem, but it can delay your flight time for a while if it takes you 20 minutes to untangle some rope. So pulling the rope back is just very slow and steady and uniform, and if you do that, we have a light brake pressure on the winch itself for when we pull it in so it can't free spin, and that has kind of reduced our chances of a backlash when we bring the line back out.
Thanks.
Just like when we teach on the training hill, we need the proper hill. We need the proper angle on the hill. We need lack of obstructions out in front. We don't want ditches or ruts. It's the same thing with scooter towing, or the type of towing we're doing here, the trolling, the blue sky towing. And the key is a clean, flat area. You don't want roots and rocks and things on the ground that the tow line can snag on and grab. You don't want obstructions. You want just wide open spaces where a student can belly in while they're learning. We want to create a safe environment. And that's our job as instructors, is to create the safe environment for our students, and that's what we try to do here. We teach early in the morning and late in the day when there's hardly any wind. It certainly makes it safer and easier for everybody. We use good equipment. We have a lot more line out than we need. We don't want people running out of rope. And again, a clean, smooth area. Even slightly uphill, believe it or not, is a great way to teach with beginners, because if you're pulling them up a gentle slope, there's even less chance that they're going to get out of control if they start to pop up a little bit. Out here, we're very smooth and have a very controlled area. When I'm operating the scooter, people a lot of times ask me how much tension is on the line. My answer is I don't know. I don't think we need to know. We don't need to be looking at a gauge. My gauge is right in front of me. It's my student. If my student is too high off the ground, there's too much line tension. I have to reduce the power, and I never cut the power. It's always reduce gradually, increase the power gradually.